Hi, my name is Brittany New, and I'm an entrepreneur living in Barcelona, Spain. I'm here with Dr. Dave Asomaning. Dave, why don't you tell us what you do and what you're all about and what we're going to talk about today?
Hi, Brittany. Thank you for hosting this interview again, as you've been doing with our series. Good to be with you again this month. I am an executive coach and I live in Florida, and I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs to develop miracle mindsets. So I'm really passionate about miracle mindsets in the coaching space and the executive coaching space specifically. And I think that such miracle mindsets lead to improved effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment in the professional and personal lives of the leaders I work with. Today, what we're going to focus on is lesson 46 from A Course in Miracles. And this continues our series um, on forgiveness, a very specific dimension of miracle mindset. And we've been looking at different lessons from A Course in Miracles to support this study. And next year, in 2022, we'll most likely have another theme that we carry through the whole of the year, just like we're doing with forgiveness for this year. So back to you, Brittany.
Yeah, that's wonderful that we're going to have a different theme next year, but I'm kind of sad to be ending the forgiveness theme because you could talk about forgiveness in so many different ways and so many levels. And I'm really excited to introduce today's lesson on forgiveness because we've been kind of giving a lot of different nuances to the theme of forgiveness in this series. And today we're just going to add another layer of something that forgiveness is and isn't in a way that we might normally not think about. So the lesson in A Course in Miracles, lesson number 46, it says, God is the love in which I forgive. And it also starts off with this kind of radical statement, which says, God does not forgive, which is like what we've heard in all of anything we've ever learned about God is that he's very forgiving and he's a very loving and forgiving God. But it starts by saying God does not forgive. Why? Because he's never condemned in the first place. So I thought that was really interesting, and I've never heard anything about God described like that. But that, of course, makes sense because in order to forgive someone, you first have to kind of have a grievance with them. As a human, we're very familiar with this process. First, we have a grievance, disappointment, and then the second step would be to forgive as a result. So, Dave, why don't you shed more light on this topic and explain what this lesson means to you and how we can interpret it?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with what you just introduced, Brittany. I'm so excited that you're doing that. You know, I am frequently on coaching calls with individuals and with groups, and now with us too. Even though I haven't talked about this much, I usually get an immediate sort of tingling feeling. You know, it's from head to toe. It like feels like just an amazing influx of what some might call chi or life force energy or something like that. And I just felt it in a very strong way when you went right to that first line of the actual lesson. Because when I've done this with other people in a group of people, that's where everybody goes first. When we say, okay, what do you want to pick up on in this lesson? Everybody goes right to that one and says, wow, that's different. You know, that as it says there, God does not forgive because he has never condemned. Now, also, I'll be quick to add, we're making as many adjustments as we can for overly gender specific language. So when it says God does not forgive because he has never condemned, we can always replace that with God does not forgive because God has never condemned, right? We don't want to be, um, you know, unmindful of sexist language and how it can turn people off and things like that. So
I love
that's just
that.
yeah, I won't keep doing it all the time, but I just want
Yeah.
our listeners to know that we're both mindful of this,
Mm-hmm.
as we've said in previous calls, because we don't want the language to be a stumbling block for people. Any kind
Mm-hmm.
of language, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
overly Christian specific or God
Mm-hmm.
specific or whatever. It's if God is not necessarily appealing, it can use higher power, spiritual source, a lot of different things. So back to where we were on this. It is it is very, you've already said everything I think there is to say in how you introduced it. So I'm just gonna, continue on what you said just a little bit more. But I think it's really intriguing that in A Course in Miracles, there's always this departure from what people expect along traditional lines. So that's the main thing I want to say here, because the God we get in, especially in the Old Testament and a lot in the New Testament even, is just frothing at the mouth, seeming to like want to, exert justice, exercise justice and punish. If you did something wrong, you're going to get punished. It's very legalistic in a lot of ways. And in the way Christian theology has unfolded, it seems as though Jesus is like the shield that protects us from this justified wrath of
Right.
God's, which would totally demolish us. It all comes from this place where the thought is that because God is a righteous God and everything with God is clean and perfect, the mistakes we commit as human beings require some kind of equalizing justice from a righteous God. And then this is a thought system that's carried over into our legal process, right? If you do something wrong to somebody, and it's an actual crime, you have to pay for it in terms of the legal system. If you've committed a crime and it's proven that you've committed a crime, and even when you're not convicted of the crime itself, like, I mean, there's so many shows where you see um, somebody is believed, like O.J. Simpson, for instance. I mean, he's not convicted of the crime of murdering uh, his wife and her friend. Um, I think Nicole and Ron maybe were their names, but so he was not convicted of that crime, but he was later sued and had to pay like something like $30 million for and a civil suit, because it was believed in the civil approach to that case that even though criminally he wasn't guilty, he was still liable somehow. He was still found guilty, and he had to, so he's on the hook for $30 million. My point being that it's very, very pervasive in our legal system that if you do something wrong, you have to pay, even if somebody stumbles and falls and breaks their wrist from the part of the sidewalk outside your office or the carpeting. I mean, it's like, wow, okay, we're really going to be doing that. Like, I mean, you're at fault, and it's amazing. So anyway, the point is that there's a sense of righteousness about it that goes back to God as the source of this type of righteousness. And then this lesson just puts all of that to bed. Puts it all to rest. It says, yeah, God isn't holding anything against anyone. And so God has no need to forgive anyone for anything. I'm like, wow, what? And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I think the whole conversation about God being forgiving, it only comes up because in our human minds, that's the only way that we can understand unconditional forgiveness. We can't even fathom the thought of never condemning or judging in the first place, because that's not how we operate. So in order for our minds to be able to conceive this concept, they have this story about, God is unconditionally forgiving even from the moment that you commit any kind of sins or whatever you want to call them. And so that's the way that we can understand it. It's kind of the story.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We have all kinds of ways of contorting this, and I like how you're enriching our understanding that I think the Course is trying to disabuse us of all the different layers of interpretation and conceiving of God's love that we've come up with. So if we go to the next, along those lines, if we go to the next paragraph, it says, "Yet although God does not forgive, God's love is nevertheless the basis of forgiveness." Right? So that's a whole nother thing that we have to grasp in how this is being laid out. It's saying Well, God isn't really actively saying you did a bad thing, I forgive you. But the love of God is so powerful and so strong that that love automatically releases us from any burden we carry from wrongdoing, right? But it's not God actively saying, "Oh, you're off the hook," or "I'm not going to hold that against you," or but it's so. In other words, God's love is much bigger than just forgiving us and being merciful towards us. And there's an active ingredient in God's love that it just sort of fixes things, but it's almost like automatic,
Right,
you
right.
know? Yeah. Hmm.
I guess you can think of it as like God's love is the source of forgiveness, and we have this in our world have this duality between forgiving and not forgiving. It's almost like a source. Like if God is the water, and we know the difference between wet and dry, but we have to
Right.
use the water to make something wet and things dry on their own and things like that. So in His world,
Exactly.
there is no duality, but in our world, we have
Hmm.
this contrast, and that's the source with which we become more like
Perfect.
Him or them or God.
I think you're absolutely right on
Mm-hmm.
that. It goes deeper into this idea of the non duality. God is
Mm-hmm.
just God,
Mm-hmm.
perfect, eternal, all the time, the
Mm-hmm.
same. And in that place, there's nothing negative.
Right.
And that's why it's like your example, water is always wet. There is
Mm-hmm.
nothing called dry.
Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
so dry cannot even exist
Mm-hmm.
in the land of wetness, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Negativity, suffering, sin, whatever it is, cannot even exist in the realm of God's love. It just doesn't exist there.
Right.
Good call on that.
My
Yeah,
visual language.
you want to take over? I'll start asking the questions. When I say that, I mean that with all generosity of spirit. You're doing such a great job, and
Oh,
you've
thank
always
you.
done this on our calls of simplifying and getting right to the point, which is why I love doing these
Thank you.
interviews together.
Thank
Yeah, you're
you.
welcome. Thank you as
You're
well.
good at synthesizing the lessons into activities and exercises that you help your clients with. So, do you have
Yeah.
any?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So on that level, or with regard to that point, this lesson gives us a very simple exercise. And the exercise here, and we've encountered variations on this with the triangle of light or the let miracles replace all grievances, where we're picking somebody that we have resentments towards, right? Now here, it's a little bit, it always makes me laugh because it's a little bit of a nuance here where it says, spend a minute or two in searching your mind for people whom you have not forgiven. It does not matter how much you have not forgiven them, you have forgiven them entirely or not at all. Then it says, this is the funny part. I always think that there's a deep sense of humor in these lessons. It says, if you are doing the exercise as well, you should have no difficulty in finding a number of people you have not forgiven. It is a safe rule that anyone you do not like is a suitable subject. I'm like, what? Okay, now it's like, you know, finding a number of people. That's going to be like how many notepads do we have to fill? Like when I think of all the people I don't like,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
as I was preparing for this this interview, the last week or so, and I was just thinking to myself, wow, I see that person on TV, or I see that person in a movie, or I mean, it's just constant. It's like a
Hmm.
barrage of or people closer in my life, or I mean, it's just and I do based on something you said in a previous call, which I was just beginning to do at the time we did that call, and you have reaffirmed. It's there's this the main affirmation from lesson 78: let miracles replace all grievances. So I use that now more and more. Like as soon as a grievance comes into my mind about something, I was driving yesterday and uh, somebody was just going so slowly or so erratically, and I was like, "What in the world?" I really don't like that person. Okay, they're on the list, and then at the same time, I was like, "Let miracles replace all grievances." So, anything you want to say about this exercise, Brittany?
I guess I want to say that we get into situations on a daily basis where we might have grievances toward people. And, as much as we think we're going to have a long list of people that we don't like, we also hopefully have the gift of forgetting about things that have bothered us. So maybe an incident like this happened on the road to you a couple weeks ago and you don't remember it enough to write it down. That means that you have actually forgiven that person, I think. So we can give ourselves a little pat on the back for all the things that we don't even remember, because that is kind of what forgiveness looks like. If we don't have these active negative feelings toward the person or the experience, then I think that is proof that we've forgiven them. So we won't be able to write as much as on a daily basis as we actually have, but that's kind of a little progress of how much we are able to forgive. So hopefully we forget things, but sometimes you hold on to a little thing. I definitely have like really, really tiny things. Like I can remember someone in a supermarket making a comment, or I don't know what it is, but if you can remember it, then you haven't forgiven them and they should go on the list.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's very good nuancing of what we're up to here, which is that we're really trying to let all this stuff go often and frequently, and we're not trying to carry it around with us, because then that defeats the whole purpose. I mean, we're just creating layer upon layer of unforgiven stuff. So, very good point. There is one other thing I'd like to highlight that this lesson raises, which is a part of what we've been doing throughout this series too, which is sort of on definitions of forgiveness, right? So in paragraph 1, it says, "Forgiveness is the great need of this world, but that is because it is a world of illusions. Those who forgive are thus releasing themselves from illusions, while those who withhold forgiveness are binding themselves to them." So this dimension of forgiveness, I think, is really, really super important because, as we've discussed on previous calls, A Course in Miracles has as its understanding of reality that as human beings, we're living in a simulation, and that everything that we are attached to and the material realm is part of that simulation. And furthermore, that everything that we're attached to is actually some symbol of unforgiveness. It comes about physically, things manifest physically within the simulation as different data points regarding our attachment to things that really represent attack thoughts inside. So when we forgive or release ourselves, what we're really doing is letting go of the deeper inner attack thought, which then deletes a part of the illusion that we're caught up in the matrix. That's a way more kind of elaborate view of forgiveness than that you did wrong to me and I'm going to pardon you. And last week, somebody really helped me get a hold of the difference here, which is that the more traditional approach to forgiveness, when I'm pardoning somebody or not holding it against them, has underneath it an undertone of martyrdom. It always comes back to I'm being a martyr somehow. In other words, I'm suffering something, but I'll be the bigger person and let you off the hook. Right? And back to what we were talking about earlier, there is no price to pay, there is no suffering. The true forgiveness is a complete release without anybody having to pay any kind of a price. Right? So anyway, I just wanted to rehash a little bit this approach to the definitions of forgiveness that we've been talking about, and then get those words salvation. So what is forgiveness and what is salvation? Salvation is just when every single source of problems related to unforgiveness, everything is completely released and gone. There's nothing left but that pure non-duality again. Then we're saved individually and collectively. Back to you.
I think that's very helpful to understand and try to wrap our minds around. Again, this is not typically how people operate in this world. Typically, there's a right and a wrong and a good and a bad and opinions and judgments. And remembering it in this way kind of helps us to even prevent having the grievances that lead us to require forgiveness. Rather, that's one way of saying living in a state of forgiveness always. So that's helpful to be more in that state always.
Right. So I'll use this to pivot towards the last part of what I think we want to treat today. And this lesson is fairly short, so we've been able to click through a lot of things relatively quickly. But um, so let's say, as a personal example for me, and I've used these kinds of examples before, but let's say that um, I've been having the experience where somebody keeps doing what I consider to be some kind of wrong to me. They keep insulting me. So they did it first time, and they were like, "Okay, let's say they said you're a real jerk," and I'm like, "Me, I'm a jerk. How could I be a jerk? I'm not a jerk," you know. And then and we talk about it. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't really see it that way." And then a month later, they're like, "Yeah, you're a real jerk," and I'm like, "Okay, this is becoming a pattern here. I want to forgive them. In other words, I want to remove all of my illusions about this, but I also want to put up a boundary where I'm not going to interact with this person anymore, and I'm not going to enable them or enable us to get into a situation again for the third, fourth, and fifth times where they somehow figure out how to call me a jerk again. I mean, so there's a balance between putting up boundaries and being able to manage situations and the illusion with boundaries, and then doing this deeper inner work of releasing our illusions about them. There's one more quick point I want to make about this, which I found really helps leaders a lot in their work. So, for instance, one of the ways this all translates that I've seen in actual situations with executives and CEOs and entrepreneurs who do a lot of hiring is that they might have somebody who keeps falling short of the expectations on the job. And then at some point, they have to have the difficult conversation about terminating that person, about firing them, about letting them go, however you want to put it. So they're having to draw, as I mentioned in the personal example for myself, they're having to draw a boundary and say, this person is not effective for our company and for our team, and I've got to let them go. Where forgiveness comes in is where the person learns to forgive themselves and the other person by not making assumptions, for instance, about the fact that this is where we're letting illusions about the situation go, where we're saying, I feel bad having to let this person go because dot dot dot. They have a family to support. They won't be able to find another job. These are all my projections of unforgiveness onto the person. Because in truth, if I don't have any of that and don't bring those assumptions, and my letting this person go in a kind and compassionate but firm way could be releasing them to all kinds of new possibilities that isn't just me BSing about, oh, trying to, put lipstick on a pig or something, make an ugly situation look nice. I mean, we're talking about real possibilities, and I'm limiting the situation by bringing my own illusions about what it means from my own guilt or back to you.
Or the other way around. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
ways we could need to practice forgiveness in this setting, but maybe the other way, like instead of me as a boss worried about firing the person, I could be taking things personally and thinking, wow, I trusted that person and they betrayed me, and that's the source that I'm using to let this person go. But there is a way, I think maybe what the solution is, it's a great question that you raised, like how do you practice forgiveness in a way without being a doormat, I guess is a good way. But being matter of fact about a situation rather than having feelings of low vibrational feelings. The matter of fact is they're not delivering on the metrics that they were supposed to deliver. They've had multiple chances to rectify the situation. Their skills have shown that they're not competent enough for the needs that we need. So observing it more matter of fact rather than worried about all these other emotional, vibrational things. And I think that would prevent there being a need for, grievances, I guess.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's true. I mean, there's so many layers, and part of the way I like to distinguish these different dimensions that you're bringing to view is, yeah, on the practical level, how can we just objectively say this person doesn't measure up to the job and they need to exit, right? And then on the psychological level, what are the different dynamics between the two different main parties to this? And then the part that we're bringing in is the spiritual, right? These are the three keys. At the spiritual level, if we plug into the divine, the outcome is going to be good. It's guaranteed to be good for everybody involved if I don't contaminate it with my own limiting assumptions about things. So I really appreciate you again teeing this up so I could talk about that. And we didn't plan this ahead of time, by the way, to those listening. So it's nice to be able to talk about those three keys. I'll just add quickly too that if you're not familiar with where to read the full lessons when we talk about them, lesson 46 for today in A Course in Miracles, you can go to acim.org. That's A Course in Miracles, but acim.org. And there's a page in which you can put the lesson number, and it'll call the lesson up for you, and you can read it there. Or you can purchase the book from Amazon. We're not shilling for them. There's no connection. We don't sell for them, but just wanted to let you know where you can find the resources if you need them. So that I think that pretty much wraps up the heart of today's lesson. Unless there's anything else that you want to say or ask about this today, Brittany.
I think that's it. I think I've got a good understanding of the lesson and an exercise to check in on, where we're not forgiving people, how we can forgive more. And we even touched on how to practice forgiveness without, letting people continue to, cross your boundaries, as you said. So that's a good sum up of what we talked about today. And I think the audience can walk away with some good things to work on for this month.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Brittany, for another excellent session, another interview session. I really appreciate these, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which will be for August. It's hard to believe that we're moving into August already, and that'll be the 8th one of these that we've done consistently. All right. Whew. Thank you.
All right. Likewise, Dave. Always a pleasure talking to you about these things, and really loving the conversations, and always leaves me feeling elevated and good vibrations going on the rest of my day. So I hope you guys watching have those feelings too, and we will see you next month on the next episode.
Thank you, Brittany. Yeah.
All
See you
right.
next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.